Catherine, what can providers do if limited resources don't allow for high-end cybersecurity and newer IoT tech?
Great question. Very briefly, Jessica mentioned risk assessments. I would recommend two practical strategies for when you routinely wrap that into your business processes and operations. One, it is definitely worth the effort, and we have seen some success in data contexts or security breach contexts. If you utilize outside counsel to come in, I'm not talking about if you do routine penetration testing or you have routine or continuous assessment running on your system through software of whether or not people are trying to penetrate it. But if you really are taking a fresh look at your organization, hire an outside lawyer, and I promise this is not a Lawyers Employment Act recommendation. It's very, very important because you're trying to keep the results of that under the umbrella of attorney-client privilege. There's still some unsettled law about that, but it's worth the effort. Let them run it, coordinate with you, report to you, and then, as Jessica mentioned, you've got to prioritize what comes back. When your resources are limited, you can't do all 5 things at once, and one of those things might be wrapping in this spiffy new IoT technology. The reason you'd love to keep that private is eventually if something doesn't work, a patient files a lawsuit, whatever reason, you don't want that list coming out to the public if you can avoid it because it makes it look like you should have done everything. And of course, it's the one thing on the list you didn't get to and couldn't pay for because there wasn't enough money to go around that you get, sued over. The second thing I would say is even if it's not covered by the attorney-client privilege, one of the key takeaway points I wanted to leave with you is you have got to document what you're doing and write your own story. I don't mean technical, anal documentation saying I complied with this and that dry regulation. I want you to think about your efforts, especially if you're a small provider or office or organization, in this bigger picture as a story that eventually you would tell a jury or try to persuade somebody that you were doing the right thing for the right reasons. As a theme, always wrap in how you're trying to get to better patient care, security, and privacy. Wrap those themes in. And if you can't do everything at once and you've got to spend your resources somewhere else, then you want to be able to write something down or any documentation you do create. You want to be able to explain why you had to put resources somewhere else in a way that will make sense to real folks. That's my suggestion so that you can do it one step at a time.
All right. Thank you very much, Helen Catherine. Jessica, aside from email hacking, what are the most common security threats and risks that if you're using IoT in healthcare, you need to address? And if you would as well, you can also add in some of the key takeaways you got for today.
Sure. Good question. Other than what I previously talked about, there's malicious code that can go undetected. This is one of the largest, most unpredictable of the cyber threats out there. Software can be installed in-network and go undetected and command networks to get data without anyone in the company knowing it. For example, malware can make a medical device unusable and vulnerable to denial of service attacks and silence failures where the device remains usable but it fails to do what the physician tells it to. As I discussed before, companies can pay to regain access to their records, but there's no guarantee that hackers didn't infiltrate in multiple ways, so you could end up paying them again in a few months. The software is often not designed to accept patches or fixes if they're available. Most frequently, upgrades are simply not developed. And also, reducing the risk in older implanted devices requires the mutual decision of patients and doctors to replace existing devices through surgery. Depending upon the health and the stability of the patient, some device replacement procedures can be considered life-threatening. In terms of key takeaway points, I would just like to emphasize it's important to implement a proactive, comprehensive risk management plan. First and foremost, we have to assess the risk of patient harm, including whether it's controlled or uncontrolled. We have to keep in mind that the FDA is trying to encourage and foster collaboration and information sharing. It's important for companies to have a plan and test it. Human error is one of the greatest vulnerabilities. Employee training is essential. Ensure that any data transferred over wireless systems is encrypted, and have a team in place. There should be an internal discussion between senior management and IT staff about risk management. And if a breach occurs, secure a legal team and a data breach coach. And those are the points I would like to have you all take away from this.
Thank you, Jessica Hines. Samir Gokhale, your key takeaways, if you would.
Yeah, I think that the key takeaway is to really focus your patent application on where your competitive landscape is going to be. I think that if you're developing a product in this area, you have to strongly consider, where you fit into this whole end-to-end system, and where your greatest protection of your investment is going to lie. But also, don't let people copy your concept or get ahead of you on these concepts. I think that there's a lot of area in the patent world to get patents on Internet of Things technology that may seem obvious, but someone could get a patent on it. You could be a large company that isn't currently developing your IoT solution now, but later when you do, you might find out there's a whole field of patents that already exist just on connecting known technologies to the Internet. And you're going to want to get ahead of that and make sure that you're not too late in the game and getting your patent protection. And yeah, just make sure you're aware of kind of the fluctuating nature of U.S. patent law, especially how they try to interpret computer technology. There's sort of an anti-software sentiment in a lot of areas in the patent world, and the rules, even if they don't get rid of software patents or make it harder to get, they're going to make it trickier to get, and you want to make sure you have experienced people drafting your applications to kind of navigate that minefield.